So I'm going to start off our first session, which is the patient perspective. And this is going to be about what it's like to be in a clinical trial. And there are different types of research studies for those of you who have never participated in a research study. Some are surveys and interviews that you might do online or get by email. Some are observational studies that researchers do without you directly enrolling. And then there's clinical trials where you sign up to test a new treatment or test a new diagnostic test. And all of these types of research are really important for understanding why these diseases occur, how we might prevent them, how they're diagnosed, how they're best treated, and how they're best managed. We have learned so much over the last 20 plus years about eosinophilic diseases, and Dr. Bussey is going to get into that in a minute. And that understanding really helps us understand the best treatment options for a particular disease. So to give us a look at what trial participation is like, I'm going to welcome our first speaker, Jessica Grady. She is from Pennsylvania. She was diagnosed with EOE about 15 years ago, and she's going to share her story as a clinical trial participant. So join me in welcoming Jessica.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jessica, for being here. We really appreciate you sharing your story with us today. I know it can be really hard, but it's very courageous to get up here and share your story with everyone. Can you tell us a little bit? You're going to do fine. You're going to be fine. Can you tell us a little bit about what led to you participating in a clinical trial? Did you find it on your own? Did your doctors find it? And how many have you been in?
Right. Thanks. So I actually work in the R&D space within life sciences. So I was exposed to clinical trials from just my day-to-day. But what really led me to clinical trials was I was going to multiple different healthcare systems trying to understand what was wrong with me, and I wasn't really getting those results. So I decided to work with a doctor that also supports research and clinical trials. So that's the way that I enrolled in a clinical trial, from meeting with a doctor, finding out that we work well together, getting endoscopies and trusting him, and then going to that next stage of going into the clinical trials. I've participated in 2. Unfortunately, the first one, my criteria was not met. I had 2 out of the 3 marks that they were looking for EOE. So I was unfortunately not able to participate in one, but then they submitted me to another clinical trial that I was eligible for.
And what did that clinical trial involve? Was that a study of a medication or diagnostic test? What was involved in that?
Yes, that was a medication versus placebo. It was completely randomized. So I took a risk of either being medicated or not. But they both were focusing on EOE, the medications.
And were you nervous about participating in a clinical trial? You said you had some experience with clinical trial work, so you had some idea of what to expect. Were you nervous at all about being in the study?
Yeah, I would say, although I was familiar from a professional standpoint, that's pretty different than your personal life. I was aware of patient burdens and things like that. So I was very anxious about, what's the expectation and what it truly means to be in a clinical trial.
And what is that experience like? You sign up, you fill out your consent form, and then what does that look like from a scheduling perspective? Did you have to come in at certain time intervals, and was your follow-up more frequent than it would have been if you were not in the study?
Yes, I would say being part of a clinical trial, first off, you are made a top priority. It's not like you're a patient, another number at a doctor's appointment. So there's a lot of communication, a lot of education. A lot of training too, because that's in the case for me, like I had a provision device. It wasn't my actual cell phone. So I had to learn how to use a device, which is, you have to go to that appointment to get that device. The endoscopies, you're still getting those done. You're still checking in. So there's a lot of visits overall, and a lot of communication throughout the entire process.
It sounds like you're monitored very, very carefully in the
Yeah.
clinical trial, maybe more so than if you weren't in it.
Absolutely. You are definitely, like I said, I can't say this enough, you are a priority. So you're getting a deep level of education, a deep level of an understanding. There is a lot of participation on your end though, and a lot of time commitment on your end. But overall, you get a lot of information and a lot of support more than you normally would at a regular doctor's appointment.
And the device you mentioned, what was that for?
Yeah, so I had to do daily diary logs. So I had a provision device, meaning I have an iPhone. In this case, they gave me an Android, so it was a completely different learning curve. But that device just had an app. You log into that and you monitor your symptoms like twice a day. And those symptoms twice a day are also time constrained. So I had to enter that by X time and the other one by 10 p.m. at night, for example. So I had to send an alarm on my one phone to go to my other phone to put that information in.
And then you would download that or they review it in the
So
clinic?
that would go right over. That data would all integrate over to the clinical nurse and the clinical team to monitor those results.
And you said you were on a medication, correct, that they were studying?
Yes.
And was your study placebo controlled? Did you know if you were getting the real medication or placebo?
Yeah, I did not know that was the risk that I took. I still don't know whether it was the medication or the placebo.
And are you still in the trial?
No, I'm not. I'm actually currently on Dupixent now.
Okay. So you finished the trial and now you're
Yeah.
on Dupixent. Yeah.
Well, yes. So what happened with me with that particular study was there were some technical issues within the device and the app actually wouldn't let me put in daily logs. So I was trying to email the tech team and providing that through email. But unfortunately, with strict protocols and the way that clinical trials are set up, there's no room for flexibility with that. So I actually was removed from the study because of those couple of days I wasn't able to put my daily logs in.
So ran into some technical challenges with the logging device to track your symptoms.
Yes, and that was really sad for me because that was months in. That wasn't like a couple days or anything in. So I was committed to that. And in part of the work that I was doing at that point, we had something called BYOD, which is bring your own device. So in my head, it was a bummer that I wasn't able to just download that app on my own phone and participate and put the daily logs in that way.
Yeah, that is disappointing, but it does tell you just how detail oriented and committed they are to
Yes.
accurate information in the clinical trials of these new therapies.
Yep.
Um, do you have any regrets about participating in the study?
No, not at all. I'm glad that I did it. It was a great learning experience. I would do another one. I think they're very valuable, and there's really nothing to regret about doing it. I would just say the only thing that I wish that could have been different is that the technology was there, options for virtual televisits, making it a
Mm.
little more easy for the patient because I live in the suburbs, but I would have to drive to the city, for example. And then having the issue with the provision device, if I could just use my device, there's so many things that I wish could have been done differently, but definitely no regrets.
So, to make your life easier, some of the follow up, if it could have been done by telehealth, would have been helpful, made things more convenient for you. And if you had the ability to, say, use a website to log that information rather than a specific device, that would have perhaps allowed you to stay in.
Right. Agree.
Yeah. Well, this is good feedback for all the researchers out there who are wondering how to, ramp up clinical trial enrollment and some of the things that may impact a patient from a logistical perspective. The logistics have to work out for everybody involved. What was the best thing about participating?
Yeah, the best thing was the process of getting endoscopies. I mean, when you go into a clinical trial, you actually, in my case, I can't speak for all, but I was compensated for participating in a clinical trial. So I didn't really have the high expense cost from insurance after an endoscopy. So I really thought that participating in a clinical trial, it helped with the endoscopies. It became simpler. And I really felt comfortable voicing my concerns about my EOE and really trying to understand what's causing my EOE. That was that level of detail that I was able to get from being in that clinical trial versus, again, just being a patient.
Yeah, that makes sense. That big benefits
Yes.
to the patient. Yeah.
Yeah.
We may have people listening who are thinking about joining a clinical trial. And for those listening who don't know where to find these opportunities, if your doctor hasn't mentioned them, you can go to clinicaltrials.gov and search for your disease, or you can go to the APFED website. We have links to research studies that are relevant to the eosinophil-based diseases, and those are good places to find a clinical trial. So, Jessica, if somebody's thinking about joining a clinical trial, what advice would you give them? What questions should they ask, and what should they consider?
Yeah. I would definitely say if you're considering it, try to do it. It could either save you or somebody else, but as I've mentioned before, you are made a priority. This is a level of education and care for yourself that you can't typically get. So I think that's really important when deciding that you can get that level of support. But for you, the questions are really, do you have the time commitment? What's necessary? What do you need to do to enroll and stay in there in those clinical trials? Because there is a level of, work that you need to do to participate. It's not just, an appointment and you walk in. There's things that you have to do day to day in some of these clinical trials. And you just need to, ask yourself whether you have the time commitment to do that. And depending on the drive, if you have the transportation. But it's definitely valuable. And I would say, please do it.
And that makes sense. And some, are easier than others. As you know, filling out a survey is typically a fairly simple ask of patients, but undergoing a protocol with medications and follow-up and endoscopies is a different level
Yes.
of involvement for the patient. Yes.
Yeah.
So think
Okay.
about whether or not you can commit, right?
Right. Yep.
All right. Jen, do we have any questions from the audience for Jessica?
We do not have any questions that have come in yet, but I would encourage everyone to open up that Q&A box and type in your questions.
Awesome. So Jessica, I'll share my own little clinical trial experience too, as well, briefly. I'm enrolled in the protocol at the NIH. So mine is not very involved day to day, but I do go once a year for a day of testing. And some of those expenses are covered, but a good bit fall on me. So it's been a great opportunity to help them learn more about my particular disease. But definitely it's a commitment in terms of time and travel and, time away from work, time away from home to do that kind of stuff.
That's interesting. Yeah. I don't hear too many stories about clinical trials and the participation experience for our type of diseases. So that was interesting to hear yours. And I'm always looking for an opportunity to do another one, of course, because injecting myself in my stomach, it's something that's a challenge every week.
Yes, you got to psych yourself up for that one.
Yeah.
We have a question from the audience. How did you find out about the clinical trial that you participated in? Where did you find out that it was available to you?
Yes. So the GI doctor that I worked with was actually in the research department for Penn. So he connected me with a clinical nurse that then enrolled me and emails me about upcoming or any trials like that. So for anybody interested or looking, I know we've mentioned this before, but if your doctor has, clinical research experience or anything like that, they're going to be able to help connect you to a clinical trial.
And sometimes I think you have to ask, right? You have to ask the doctor if you would be a candidate and if they're aware of anything.
Yes, I think you always need to be your own advocate for yourself and ask those type of questions regardless. You always have to voice how you're feeling and what you're doing and what you want out of this.
That is good advice. Always advocate for
Yes,
yourself in the medical system. All
definitely.
right. Well, Jessica, we're just about out of time. I want to thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your story and your experience and helping other people understand what might be involved in enrolling in a research study and how important it is to advance the field, that people do volunteer their time and commit to these studies. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.